She has survived Hollywood longer than most careers last. She has weathered tabloid storms that would have destroyed lesser people and emerged each time with her dignity intact. Nicole Kidman at 58 years old has seen it all. But on this particular morning at The View, just days after her triumphant return to the Oscars, Joy Behar decided that all of it needed to be questioned. The divorce from Keith Urban, the estrangement from her older children, the controversial erotic thriller that had critics and audiences divided, the face that looked different every time she appeared in public. Joy came armed with every weapon the tabloids had ever handed her, ready to tear down one of cinema's most accomplished actresses. What she didn't expect was that the woman sitting across from her had spent 40 years learning exactly how to handle people who confused cruelty for journalism. Subscribe and drop a comment below, because what you're about to witness is the moment Nicole Kidman reminded everyone why she's still standing after all these years. The View studio felt charged with anticipation when Nicole Kidman walked onto the set. At 58 years old, she moved with the elegant grace that had made her a star 4 decades ago. Her strawberry blonde hair fell in soft waves around her face. Everything about her presence said, "This is a woman who has earned her place." It was her first appearance at the Academy Awards since 2023, her first major red carpet since filing for divorce from Keith Urban in September. The internet had analyzed every moment, every expression, every interaction with her Moulin Rouge co-star, Ewan McGregor, on stage. Some called it flirtatious. Others saw a woman simply doing her job with professionalism. Her career was in full bloom despite the personal turmoil. Scarpetta had just premiered on Prime Video. Practical Magic 2 with Sandra Bullock was coming in the fall. Lioness was shooting its 3rd season. She had been named co-chair of the Met Gala alongside Beyoncé. At an age when most actresses struggled to find meaningful roles, Nicole Kidman was working more than ever. Whoopi Goldberg embraced her warmly. Sarah Haynes looked genuinely thrilled. The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted nearly a minute. Even Joy Behar smiled, though her eyes held that familiar, calculating gleam that regular viewers had learned to recognize. "Nicole Kidman, welcome back to The View," Whoopi announced as the applause faded. "You look absolutely stunning, and we are so happy to have you here." "Thank you, Whoopi. It's wonderful to be here. This show always feels like coming home to family." "Let's talk about Scarpetta." Sarah jumped in warmly. "You're playing one of the most iconic characters in crime fiction. Patricia Cornwell's books have sold millions of copies. How did you prepare for that role?" Nicole's face lit up at the question. Scarpetta is a woman who has dedicated her life to speaking for the dead. She's a medical examiner who sees the worst of humanity, but never loses her compassion. I spent time with real forensic pathologists, visited morgues, studied how they maintain their humanity while doing such difficult work. It's one of the most challenging roles I've ever taken on. Speaking of challenging, Joy interjected, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Let's talk about your personal life, Nicole. You just went through a very public divorce from Keith Urban after 19 years. Your first major marriage ended in divorce, too. That's 2 high-profile relationships that didn't work out. At what point do you start wondering if maybe you're the common denominator?" The question landed like a slap. Sarah's eyes widened. Whoopi's expression hardened, but Nicole's composure remained remarkably steady, though those who knew her might have noticed a slight tightening around her eyes. "That's quite an opening, Joy. I appreciate the directness. I'm just asking what people at home are thinking. Are they? Or is that what tabloids want people to think?" Nicole paused, her voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Every relationship is different. Every ending has its own reasons. I was married to Tom for 11 years, and we raised 2 beautiful children together. I was married to Keith for 19 years, and we raised 2 more. Those aren't failures. Those are decades of life, of love, of building families. The fact that they ended doesn't erase everything that came before. But doesn't it suggest a pattern?" Joy pressed. 2 marriages, both ending in divorce. Sources say Keith was blindsided. Sources say you didn't want this either, but couldn't make it work. Reports say your daughters have taken your side. Reports say Keith is going through some kind of midlife crisis. What keeps going wrong?" Nicole was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone who had clearly thought deeply about this. "Joy, I'm going to say this once, and I hope you're listening. I'm not going to discuss the private details of my marriage on television. What I will say is that Keith and I spent 19 years building a life together. We have 2 daughters who are the center of both our worlds. We will always be a family. The rest is between us. But don't the public have a right to know? You celebrated your anniversary publicly in June. You posted photos. You seemed happy. And then 3 months later, you filed for divorce. Don't you owe people an explanation? Owe them? Nicole's voice remained steady, but took on an edge. I don't owe anyone the intimate details of my marriage. What people saw on Instagram was a moment. What happened in our home, in our hearts over 19 years, belongs to us. The public has a right to my work. They don't have a right to my pain. The response was delivered with such quiet dignity that the audience seemed to lean forward collectively. Joy shifted in her seat, clearly not getting the defensive reaction she had hoped for. Let's talk about your children, then. You have 2 adult children from your marriage to Tom Cruise, Isabella and Connor. They're both heavily involved in Scientology and reportedly have limited contact with you. That must be incredibly painful for a mother. The mention of her older children struck visibly deeper. Nicole's composure flickered for just a moment before she steadied herself. My relationship with Bella and Connor is between us. They are adults now, 33 and 31 years old, making their own choices. I love them. I will always love them. And I respect their privacy enough not to discuss them on a talk show. But people are curious about how a mother loses contact with her own children. I haven't lost them, Joy. Nicole's voice carried something new now, something harder. They are my children. Whatever our relationship looks like from the outside, they know I love them. That's what matters. Not what tabloids speculate, not what talk show hosts imply. What matters is what we know in our hearts. Joy seemed to sense she was losing ground but pushed forward anyway. Fine. Let's talk about your work then. Baby Girl, the erotic thriller where you played a CEO having an affair with an intern nearly 30 years younger than you. You were 57 years old filming explicit sex scenes with a 28-year-old. Some people found that uncomfortable. Even your own children reportedly refused to watch it. The pivot to Baby Girl was clearly calculated to embarrass. Nicole's expression shifted to something that looked almost amused. Are you asking me if I regret making a film that explored female sexuality and desire from a woman's perspective? Because the answer is no. Absolutely not. But the age gap. Harris Dickinson is 29 years younger than you. If the roles were reversed, people would be calling it predatory. Would they? Nicole leaned forward slightly. Because I can name you 50 films where men in their 60s romance women in their 20s and nobody bats an eye. George Clooney, Harrison Ford, Richard Gere, the list goes on forever. But when a woman my age explores her sexuality on screen, suddenly it's controversial. You have to admit the scenes were graphic. You said yourself that filming was so intense you had to stop because the orgasms were overwhelming. I said the emotional and physical demands of those scenes were overwhelming. That's what happens when you commit fully to a character. I've collapsed on sets. I've needed therapy after roles. I broke my ribs filming Moulin Rouge. I gave everything to Virginia Woolf in the hours. That's what the work requires. The fact that Baby Girl required sexual vulnerability doesn't make it less legitimate as art. Joyce smirked. Some critics called it gratuitous. Some said it was a vanity project for an aging actress desperate to prove she's still desirable. The accusation hung in the air. Nicole's eyes hardened. Vanity project? An aging actress? That's what you reduce 40 years of work to. Helena Rain wrote and directed a film about female desire, about the complexity of power in relationships, about what happens when a woman who has controlled everything her entire life surrenders that control. That's not vanity. That's art. That's storytelling. And I'm proud to have been part of it. The age gap that would have been completely unremarkable if the genders were reversed. Men in their 60s have been romancing women in their 20s on screen for a century. And nobody clutches their pearls. But a woman in her 50s explores her sexuality, and suddenly it's controversial. Nicole leaned forward slightly. Baby Girl was about a woman who had spent her entire life being powerful in every arena except one, who had never felt permission to explore her own desires, who discovered parts of herself she had suppressed for decades. That's a story worth telling. That's a story many women recognize in themselves. You said you had to stop filming because the orgasms became too much. That seems excessive. I said that the emotional and physical demands of those scenes were overwhelming. That's true of any role that requires vulnerability. When you give yourself fully to a character, there are costs. I've collapsed on sets before. I've needed therapy after roles. That's what commitment to craft looks like. Joy's face showed frustration at not landing her blows. Fine. Let's talk about something else, then. Your appearance. You've changed significantly over the years. There's constant speculation about what procedures you've had done. Your face at the Oscars this year looked different from even a few years ago. Care to comment? The question was deliberately cruel, designed to humiliate, but Nicole's response was unexpectedly calm. I'm 58 years old, Joy. I've been in the public since I was 16. Every line on my face, every change in my appearance has been documented and debated for 40 years. I've been told I was too tall, too pale, too thin, too old for roles since I was in my 30s. And you know what? I'm still here. She gestured toward herself. This face has played Virginia Woolf. This face has played Lucille Ball. This face has played a woman discovering her sexuality at 57. This face has appeared on screens for 4 decades and will continue to do so because the work is what matters, not whether I've had Botox or fillers or whatever else the tabloids want to speculate about. So, you're not denying? I'm not confirming or denying anything because it's none of your business. My face is my instrument. What I do to maintain it is between me and my mirror, just as what you do to maintain yours is between you and yours. The counter landed precisely. Joy's face flushed, and for the first time in the interview, she seemed genuinely rattled. I'm just asking questions that viewers want answered. No, you're not. You're asking questions designed to humiliate. You've brought up my divorces, my children, my body, my face. You haven't asked me about my production company. You haven't asked about the female directors I've championed throughout my career. You haven't asked about the work that actually matters to me. Nicole's voice rose slightly, but remained controlled. Let me tell you something about survival in this industry, Joy. I've been doing this since 1983. I've seen actresses come and go, careers rise and fall, women my age pushed aside for younger models, and I'm still here. Not because I've been lucky, not because I've had an easy path, because I've worked harder than almost anyone, made choices that scared me, and refused to let people like you define my worth. People like me. People who confuse gossip for journalism. People who think asking about a woman's face is more interesting than asking about her work. People who would rather tear someone down than celebrate what they've built. The studio was completely silent now. Nicole straightened in her chair, her presence somehow larger than it had been moments before. You want to know why both my marriages ended? Life is complicated. People change. Love isn't always enough to keep 2 people together, no matter how much they want it to be. That's not failure. That's being human. Her voice softened but carried more power. You want to know about my children with Tom? They are adults making their own choices, and I respect them enough to let them do that without using them as ammunition for a talk show segment. That's not estrangement. That's motherhood. You want to know about baby girl? I took a role that terrified me, that pushed me further than I'd ever been pushed because that's what artists do. We grow. We risk. We refuse to be confined by what people expect of us at any age. She stood up, and the movement seemed to signal something final. You want to know about my face? This face has laughed and cried and aged in front of the entire world. It has been analyzed and criticized and debated for 4 decades, and I am done apologizing for what time and life have done to it. I am done explaining my existence to people who have never created anything except controversy. Joy tried to respond, but Nicole held up a hand. I came here today to talk about my work, about Scarpetta, about practical magic, too, about the incredible opportunities one still have at 58 years old. Instead, I got an interrogation about my personal life, my body, and my face. That says more about this show than it does about me. She began removing her microphone, her movements deliberate and controlled. I've survived things that would have broken most people. 2 divorces, public humiliation, the tabloid circus that has followed me for decades, and I'm still here, still working, still creating, still standing. She looked directly at Joy, and her voice dropped to something quiet but devastating. What have you survived, Joy? What have you created? What will you be remembered for when this is all over? Because I know exactly what my legacy is. I'm not sure you can say the same. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in her career on The View, she seemed completely speechless. With that, Nicole turned and walked off the set. Her heels clicked against the floor with measured precision. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The security of someone who knew exactly who she was radiated from every step. The studio sat in stunned silence. Whoopi covered her face with her hands. Sarah looked like she was fighting back tears. Alyssa Farah Griffin stared at the empty chair where Nicole had been sitting just moments before, and Joy sat alone at the desk, looking smaller somehow than she had when the interview began. The woman who always had a comeback had finally met someone who left her with nothing to say. In the control room, producers were already fielding calls from network executives. The cameras had captured everything. Every accusation, every deflection, every moment of Nicole Kidman's quiet devastation of Joy Behar's attack. In the days that followed, the interview would become a cultural moment. Nicole Kidman destroys Joy Behar with class would trend on every platform. Her words about surviving and creating would be quoted by women of every age who had ever felt reduced to their appearance or their relationships. The clip of her saying, "The public has a right to my work, not my pain," would be shared millions of times. Joy Behar would return to the show the next day without addressing what had happened. When pressed by critics, she would insist her questions were fair game for a public figure. The defense would only fuel the backlash as clip after clip of Nicole's measured, devastating responses circulated online. Viewer complaints flooded ABC. Sponsors began quietly distancing themselves from the segment. Sandra Bullock would post a simple message from the Practical Magic 2 set. "This is my sister witch. This is the woman I've known for 3 decades. She has more grace in her little finger than most people have in their entire lives. Cannot wait to make magic with her again. Love you, Nick." Reese Witherspoon, her Big Little Lies co-star and neighbor in Nashville, would add, "Nicole Kidman doesn't need to explain herself to anyone. Her work speaks. Her character speaks. And today, her dignity spoke louder than any question designed to tear her down." That's the Monterey 5 energy right there. Keith Urban, despite everything that had happened between them, would release a brief statement. "Nicole is the mother of my children and will always have my respect. What I saw today reminded me why I fell in love with her in the first place. Some things are sacred and some questions should never be asked." Patricia Cornwell, whose Casey Scarpetta character Nicole had brought to life in Scarpetta, would tweet, "I chose Nicole Kidman because she understands what it means to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. Today she spoke for every woman who has been reduced to gossip. That's my Scarpetta." And Nicole would return to work, to Leonis in Texas, to the Met Gala preparations with Beyoncé, to Sunday Rose's rising modeling career and Faith Margaret's teenage years, to a career that showed no signs of slowing down despite everything the tabloids threw at her. Because that was who she was. The woman who kept working. The woman who kept standing. The woman who had learned over 40 years in the spotlight that the best revenge against those who wanted to see her fall was simply to keep rising. That was the real Nicole Kidman. Not the divorce, not the mother of our young children, not the aging actress desperately clinging to relevance. Just a woman from Sydney who had conquered Hollywood on her own terms and refused, absolutely refused to let anyone define her worth, and who had proven on live television that true class is knowing exactly when to walk away. What do you think about this incredible confrontation? Was Joy Behar out of line, or was she just doing her job? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that will absolutely leave you speechless.